So we're going to talk about the poem A Song, and it's on the screen now. Hopefully you can see it. Miss James, do you want to talk us through, or just tell us, so this is a song by Helen Maria Williams. Tell me what it's about, or what should we talk about what it's about for you?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand a bit of the background to it, because if we look at the date that it's written, it's at the time of the Napoleonic Wars, and which were called the heyday of prize warfare. The Royal Navy offered large shares of prize money for people who captured enemy ships. And I think we need to understand that often young men who were younger sons, they wouldn't really inherit, and so they had to make their money. And often going to sea was a way that they could do that. So I think what we've got here is a situation where we've got the sort of values of the two people involved, the woman and her lover. They're very, very different. The man is coming at stuff from a very different place from the woman. She wants love, and values that is the value to her. He obviously feels the need. I mean, maybe because he's a man of his time, and men were obviously supposed to provide. Maybe he just feels that he needs to provide as a man, or maybe he wants a sense of adventure. I don't know. But they share very different values, and that's the source of conflict in the poem. Yeah,
it is, isn't it? I mean, you look at this first stanza here, and we've got riches and value and giving. And all she wants is his heart, isn't she? So she's after love essentially, and he's after something more material.
Yeah, and I think that is made very clear because throughout the poem there is a lexical field of worth, isn't there? I mean, you've just picked up the word riches, and then in the same line we've got the word scanty. On line 3, we've got boon, which is like a gift. We've got valued. In the next verse, we've got worth again. And we've got in verse 3, or the first line of that, we've got the word gain. We've also got riches, we've got prize. And in verse 4, we've got words like frugal and lowly, simple and humble. So throughout there is this lexical field of worth, and that's linked to the feelings of the two people, I feel.
So do you feel that the our speaker then, who's the woman is the speaker, isn't it? Do you feel that she basically values love above material gain, doesn't she?
Yeah, above everything.
Yeah.
You can't help wondering if she's being a little bit naive there, because it's all very well, isn't it? Yeah. But when you are in the lowly cot, which is a cottage, and that's all you've got, you just wonder how realistic that is. Maybe the man is being more realistic than she is,
because
but you can't help but admire the sort of sincerity of her feelings and the purity of her feelings.
Yeah, I mean, she's been quite naive, isn't she, in many respects, saying that all she needs. Reminds me of kind of the way Romeo is in some of his bits and pieces, talking about love and how his love will conquer all.
As if love's the only thing that matters. But when day-to-day life gets in the way, and obviously at this time there would be no contraception, and you'd probably start churning out children, and crammed into your lowly cot, it might not have been as much fun as she probably thinks it's going to be.
No, absolutely. Yeah, she's got a very idealistic view of love, hasn't she? Whereas it's interesting. I mean, it's just purely from her viewpoint, this, isn't it? And we don't hear about we've got the pronoun his here and he, the repetition of that, I suppose, to show she's thinking about him, and actually it's repeated throughout, really, isn't it? That, but it's just her, isn't it, pouring out her kind of viewpoint on this.
Yeah. Sorry, go
on. No, you go.
Oh, well, I was going to say that she does have these very idealistic values, doesn't she? His soul sincere, she says in verse 2, his generous worth. I mean, she values those qualities. She values the man, doesn't she? The nature of the man. Whereas we get the impression that he values other things in verse 3. Why wander riches to obtain? Her love is the prize. Whereas he obviously wants more materialistic things that will give him status in the world in which they live.
And brilliant, and there's a perfect, those two lines sort of juxtaposed perfectly, don't they, with the, the riches that he prizes and the love that she prizes. or the riches that he wants to obtain explicitly, and the love that she prizes there. So I think that juxtaposition there between those two lines is symbolic, isn't it, of everything, essentially.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's personification in the poem as well, isn't there? I mean, she, in verse 5, she personifies the pitiless or the faithless waves there. I mean, it's almost like she's seeing the sea as her rival. Taking him away from her, isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. So the faithless there, I suppose, is about their relationship, isn't it? It's going to destroy their relationship and break it up. Into which I pour my woe. I like that, the idea of pouring, linking to the waves and
there's a real sense of her distress, isn't there? Really, my tears vainly flow. I mean, it's nothing to do with vanity. It's vainly in the sense of it's not doing anything, is it? She's just crying and crying. It's not changing anything at all.
No, you're right. Do you think then, obviously this is quite, a lot of poems in English are quite negative, but do you think this, as this poem ends, is it, what's the message at the end? Do you think it's that actually, perhaps her love is useless in this context, or with the storm in her soul there? I mean, it seems like things are going to end badly for her, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think she has a fear for her lover. So the storm could be the sort of turbulent feelings that she has. She's really uncertain. She doesn't know where he is or what's going on. Is he being under fire? All this kind of thing. So that's part of the storm, the sort of tempest within her, isn't it? Yeah. But as well as that, it could be this feeling of, they have a conflict, that they're obviously, love brings you together, and that happens when you first meet somebody, but their values are making them drift apart. So there's a physical distance as well as an emotional distance between them, and that's being shown by the storm in her soul, isn't it?
Right.
I think.
I mean, and that's, as we said, that's accentuated throughout, isn't it? That he values, material goods, and she values his heart, essentially. But, I think this is very emphatic, this ending, isn't it? That, the dark night, the deep water, every breeze I weep, the storms in my soul.
Yeah, because the storm isn't in the sea, is it? Soft the billows roll. It's not a turbulent night. It's quite a gentle night in terms of weather. But to her, there is a tempest there, isn't it? Her emotions are in a terrible state there.
So I mean, you're just sort of thinking about how this might relate to sort of a GCSE question, and we're moving ahead here. But it's about suffering? Is it this poem then, or is it about loss? It's about
different values, I think, as well. Sort of conflict, really.
That we see, and
the conflict within their relationship. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's called a song, and we expect a song to be a sort of celebration, usually, don't we? But here it isn't. It's a very sort of mournful song, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It's written, it's very regular, isn't it? We've got a regular rhyme scheme, and each verse looks the same. So unlike some of the poems, for example, In Paris With You, where there's a real change in the feelings as the poem goes through, and you can see that from the look of the poem on the page. Here it doesn't look like that, it looks the same, and I think that's sort of helps to exemplify her constancy, because her feelings for him are the same throughout, aren't they? She just wants him, and she's upset about him. So we get that, it's sort of replicated through the form and the structure of the poem.
Yeah, that regular kind of, structure, like you say. That's good. So I think it's about suffering, isn't it? It's about loss, it's about having different values, as you said. And there's a sense, isn't there, that actually things aren't going to end well for her because of these very different values. And so is she being naive then, this speaker? Is she being, could we say that she's being unrealistic in her expectations? Because like you said, this man has to go off and earn money and has to go off and do this, that and the other.
I think, we've got to look at it as a poem of its time, really, haven't we? The way that there were different gender roles and different values, and probably men and women didn't have definitely didn't have the equality that they have today, and so on. I mean, she's put in quite a passive role, isn't she, of having to wait. He's got the active role of being able to go off and, wear a uniform and do exciting things. Although it might be dangerous, but it's much more active than her role, isn't it?
Brilliant. Great. I think that's. Anything else you want to add?
Only about the tenses, I think, because it starts off at the beginning where it's in the past tense, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
Then we get the present tense. There's kind of like a turning point with verse 3 with that word but. So a turning point and a change of tense there, where we're in the present. But now for me, so that's where she is at the moment.
Yeah.
And so on. And then we're back to, stay in the present right at the end, because that's where she is, isn't she? In this horrible present that she doesn't have any answers to, where she's feeling in a terribly upset state. And that's it for her, isn't it?
Yeah, you see that quite a lot in poetry, don't you? You see, a lot of the time it's all but one of the stanzas is in the past tense, and then the final stanza is that kind of reflection, isn't it, in the present tense or something.
Yeah, and that's something to look for, isn't it, I think? Where a poem starts, where it ends, is it like a circular structure, or does it move through a sort of a linear structure? That's something to look at, I think, isn't it, as we go through the anthology?
Absolutely, and it's a really simple thing for students to look at, isn't it, because all they need to know is that this makes he gave makes it in the past tense, and now for me in Search of Game from Shore to Shore, it's he flies is in the present tense there. Something really, you don't need to know anything about language really, or complicated words, but it's so symbolic, isn't it? It's that idea of looking back and then coming to the present as well, which I think is really important. And suggesting that it's very immediate then, isn't it? If it's in the present tense, she's experiencing it
more now,
which makes it more emotive and more emotional.
Definitely. I like the bit you just picked out there, but now for me, that really does show their different values, doesn't it? Because he's doing it for her, because as a man, he feels he's got to provide.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and she doesn't want that, does she? That's not what she values at all.
Absolutely. Look at the last line of that stanza there, when love is all I prize.
Yeah.
Isn't that question there at the end? It's kind of longing, isn't it, and sad and full of mournful.
And maybe her desire for him to understand her, because he thinks that she values certain things, but she obviously doesn't.
No, I mean, she just values love, doesn't she? And it seems that she doesn't. I mean, like we said, it might be unrealistic, but it seems that she doesn't care that she's got a frugal meal or a lowly cottage. If blessed my love with thee, it doesn't. As long as I've got my love is blessed with you. It's fine and simple. Look at these words here: simple, humble. They're more than me. So again, it's very kind of, for the poems, certainly in that anthology, it's quite explicit. This, isn't it? It's quite reasonably straightforward, I would say. What she desires and what she wants, but ultimately, you could say it leads to her kind of suffering at the, this sense of her kind of struggling at the end of the poem.
And there are lots of people in the poems, in our 15 poems, who are suffering for different reasons, and that's kind of interest, isn't it, to look at how they're suffering, why they're suffering. Is it self-inflicted? Is it because of a situation or whatever? And to try to make those links as we go through the poems, really.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Well, I hope that's helpful, everyone. We'll continue to put more of these on as we go. Please make notes as we go along. And send us any feedback. Wonderful.